All right. I'd like to welcome everybody out this morning, or this afternoon, or whatever. Today we're going to talk a little bit about Xamarin Forms. Lately I've been playing a lot with Xamarin Forms. I'm by no means an expert, but I've been doing a lot with it, and it's a ball as long as it's working. When it doesn't work, it's not a ball anymore. But we'll go over a couple of things and maybe try to navigate some of the bumps and missteps that can happen. So first of all, we're going to talk about how to crush the mobile world using Visual Studio and C#. So Visual Studio, the best IDE on the planet, C#, the best language on the planet. It all comes together so that we can write iOS and Android and Windows Phone and Mac and Windows and everything in between. So it's good times. So, you like that little transition there? That was pretty sweet, right?
Ooh, I missed it.
Oh, it'll do it again.
Oh, we'll do it again.
So first of all, let me just introduce myself. I think everybody here knows me, but for those that don't, my name is Troy Fillerup. I'm the Microsoft Practice Manager here at SDG. That essentially means that I know everything about every Microsoft technology ever developed. Wait, no, that's a different guy. But I've been at SDG for almost 14 years. I've really liked it. And I've been developing in Microsoft technologies for over 20 years. I actually started in Visual Basic 3. So that's probably longer than anybody else. Is anybody else Visual Basic 3? Oh, okay, never mind that. And what's that?
Yeah, maybe one.
No, that doesn't count. Those are dead languages. Well, I know, I was talking about that today. And I'm also an avid Jeeper, camper, and relaxer. I can relax better than most people. So, but there's my Jeep. I always like to show off my Jeep. It makes me feel special. All right, so that's me. So now, what are we going to talk about today? So we're going to talk about what is Xamarin and where does it fit in the development stack. When it makes sense to use Xamarin Native versus Xamarin Forms. So there's actually two different types of Xamarin that you can use, and both have their uses and their spots. How to install Xamarin? Now Xamarin comes with Visual Studio, but you have to go and you have to install Xamarin, and it is not really an easy process. They try to make it easy, but there's a lot of things that need to be in place for you to fully use Xamarin. So we'll talk about that. We're going to build a simple project. And the simplest project that I can think of is a to-do list. And so we're going to build a little to-do list that is super simple and really ugly, but it'll kind of show you some of the things that we're going to talk about. We're going to do data binding, DI to provide native functionality. So Xamarin really is a cross-platform development environment, right? But there are some things that you have to do specific to each environment. And we'll talk about how to implement that and how to deal with those things. And then we're going to save data using SQLite. So SQLite is a database that's on iOS and Android. It's really easy, and you can just pop your data into SQLite, and we'll talk about how to do that. And then I will give you the answer to life, the universe, and everything. So, right? What's that? We'll get there. Yeah. Okay, see, that was the transition I told you about. So what is Xamarin? Okay, Xamarin is a cross-platform development tool that allows you to use C# and your .NET skills, if you have those, to build cross-platform apps. You target iOS, you target Android, you target Windows Phone, and you can also write Universal Windows projects. You can write even Mac apps using Xamarin. Okay, I've never done a Mac app or a Universal Windows, but. And the thing about Xamarin is it compiles into a native app running on that platform. So you've got things like Apache Cordova, PhoneGap, that runs kind of in a container. It's an HTML app that runs in a container, and so it's what we call a hybrid app. Xamarin apps are actual native apps that run native on the platform. And you have anything that you can do in Objective-C, Swift, or Java, you can do in Xamarin. It ties into all the native APIs, and you can do anything in those languages, or anything in C# that you can in those languages. So who wants to learn all those languages when you can just use C#, right? Not me, all right? Now, another great thing about Xamarin is that you can share code between all the platforms. I mean, that's the whole point of a cross-platform tool. You can share, I'm going to say 97.36% of your code between all the different platforms. There are some things that you need to do specific to each platform. And one of the examples that we'll look at is getting a file location. So when you get into our database example, we need a place to save that database. We need to know where it is. Each platform does that a little bit differently. And so we need to write a little bit of code in each of the platform-specific projects to get that information. We'll show how to do that using dependency injection and interfaces. So there is a little bit of code that can't be shared, but most of it can. And I think, again, I think that Xamarin, in the business that we're in, I think that Xamarin can fit the needs of almost all of our clients. Line of business apps, typically you're doing a couple of things, right? You're getting data, you're displaying data, you're maybe entering data. I mean, you're not doing a lot of first-person shooter 3D games for our clients, unfortunately. That would be fun. But. So Xamarin is really fits well into that niche where we can, I think, do almost all of our mobile needs for our clients using Xamarin. And what does that give us? Well, that gives us one code base that can target multiple platforms. It integrates nicely into Visual Studio. I mean, as far as you know, you're writing just a regular Visual Studio app because, well, you are. And you have all your Visual Studio tools. If you have ReSharper, you have ReSharper in there. It's just as if you're writing any other Visual Studio application. The debugging is a little bit different in that you have to target different either emulators, simulators, or devices, but that all works pretty seamlessly from Visual Studio as well. You can actually debug on an iPhone from within Visual Studio. I mean, does that blow everybody's mind or what? It blew my mind. And it actually worked, which shocked me. I'm not going to show that today because there's a lot of weird things you have to do with an Apple developer account to make all that flow. But now, there are a lot of Xamarin apps available today. If we go look at this, I just thought this was kind of interesting. These are apps that are in the app stores that are actually written in Xamarin. So if you have ever used the Cinemark app for the theater, that's a Xamarin app. NBC Universal, there's also Ardio. If you remember that app, that was written in Xamarin. I think they're defunct now, but I don't think it had to do with Xamarin. So don't let that be a detractor there. Transportation, JetBlue. I just used JetBlue a couple weeks ago, and I was on their app. That's a Xamarin app, and it worked really well. It was really pretty cool. So there's a lot of apps out there in the store today that use Xamarin. So it's a proven platform, which I thought was pretty cool. Let's see. Okay. So do I need to hit F11, I guess? Oh, there we go. Okay. Anatomy of the Xamarin Forms app. So, like I said, Xamarin shares all your code, right? So essentially, we have all of our app logic can be shared. It's a single C# project. I use a PCL, or some people call it a pickle. I think that sounds dumb, so I call it a PCL. Then we have so in Xamarin Forms, we have our shared, let me see, is that? Yeah, okay, no, we're good. We have our shared UI code as well. So in Xamarin Forms, you actually share all of your UI code between all the platforms. And Xamarin Forms is smart enough to use the native controls on each individual platform. So you build your UI in XAML. If you're familiar with XAML, it's almost the same as WPF. There are some differences. But you build your UI in XAML, and then Xamarin is smart enough to display it in the correct UI elements on each different platform. So for instance, on Android, the little toggle switch will look like an Android toggle switch. And on iOS, it will look like an iOS toggle switch. And we'll see that as we get into the example. Now, there is some platform-specific stuff that you need to do, like I said, but it's very minimal. And we'll show you how that works. So, like I said, there's two different forms of Xamarin. There's Xamarin Native, and there's Xamarin Forms. So how do you know when to use one or the other? In my opinion, Xamarin Forms can cover almost everything. I don't think it really matters in the apps that we do. Xamarin Native, so there's Xamarin.iOS and Xamarin.android. I have to target the two different. They're a little bit easier to make customized UIs for each different platform. So if you want each platform to have a completely different UI, so you want a real iPhone looking UI, and you want a real Android looking UI, and they're totally different, you would use Xamarin Native. You craft the UI in code in Xamarin Native. So it's not as easy to do as a nice XAML structure. And if you're doing a lot of really low level stuff, you would probably want to use Xamarin Native. And now that's becoming less and less true because Xamarin Forms can access almost everything now too. Xamarin Forms does that just fine. Yep, absolutely. In fact, so I'm writing an app right now that I'm hoping to get into the Play Store. I have maps, GPS, camera access, SQL Server or SQLite, and Web API, all in Xamarin Forms, and it works so slick between all the platforms. It's really nice. So you can access all of the native hardware, all of the sensors, all of the camera, everything in Xamarin Forms. So really, I think that the Xamarin Forms is becoming robust to the point where you may not need Xamarin Native at all. But there's still that option there. So Xamarin Forms, if you're happy making a similar UI for each platform, and you just want to share as much as you possibly can and not have to do a lot of extra work, Xamarin Forms is a great way to go. And if you're comfortable with XAML already, then it's just icing on the cake. Okay, so installing Xamarin. Now Xamarin comes with Visual Studio, right? You go in and you can do a cross-platform app when you go to create a new application, but it'll tell you, hey, you need to go install Xamarin. So Xamarin, you go to this website. Well, if I can find my mouse pointer, we'll click on it. And so Xamarin.com/download, you'll fill in your information, tell it if you have Visual Studio installed or not, and then you download the Xamarin installer. The Xamarin installer will come up and it will try to install all of the pieces for you. I have yet to have that work. I don't know if I'm doing something wrong or I don't know, but I've never had that work. So what it'll do is it'll come up and say, hey, there was an error installing Xamarin. Here's all the steps you need to take to get everything installed. Because there's not just Xamarin that you have to install. You have to install the JDK, the Java Development Kit. You have to install the Java JRE. You have to install a couple of other things. But it gives you a really good, concise list, step by step, exactly what you need to install. If you're lucky and it does it all for you, then good on you. Maybe let me know what you did that I did wrong. Oh, no, I guarantee that didn't happen. So yeah, that's how that works. So hopefully it'll do it automatically. If not, just follow the manual instructions. You also need to do that on your Mac. So here's one thing that I may not have mentioned. If you want to target just Android and Windows, all you need is a Windows machine and Visual Studio. Works really well. Android is slicker than snot on a Windows machine. If you want to target iOS, we all know that it's a walled garden. You have to have a Mac to do the compilation of your iOS app. You can write everything in Visual Studio. You can do all of your code, and with Visual Studio Enterprise right here, you can even run the iOS simulator on Windows. So what it does is it actually does a remote desktop session to the Mac and brings up a remote view of the Mac on your Windows. It's all really seamless, but you have to have a Mac on the same network with Xcode and Xamarin Studio installed on it so that you can compile this stuff for iOS. So that's the only caveat.
It sounds to me because last time I used the ViewModel.
Yeah, so that's what it used as its underpinnings, and that's how it can run these .NET apps on these other platforms. Is it runs it on Mono? Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so you need to install it on your Mac. Now, when you start a new project in Visual Studio, you then connect to your Mac, and we'll do that here in just a minute. And once you're connected to the Mac, then all you need to do is hit run. You pick what simulator you want. It'll drop down every version of iOS ever made. You pick which simulator you want, and then it'll pop up that simulator, and it'll run your app there in the iOS simulator. You can also run it on your device. You either have to get a developer account that you pay $99 a year for, or you can do it free. But from what I've found so far, you can only do one app on one device for free. So it's weird. I haven't gotten to the point where I'm ready to deploy this to the iTunes store yet, so I haven't dug into that as deep as I need to. But I have gotten my other app running on my device. So, and that's a whole nother story we can go into another day. Yeah.
You said to me that instead of using Object-C or whatever, you can use C# directly because Object-C doesn't have a garbage collection. Suddenly, if there's something happens, application is killed because of that problem. But in the C#, you should not have any problem because behind the scenes, he converted to the
Well, you still have the same issues that you would in a regular .NET app, right? I mean, you need to dispose of your objects. You need to, put in exception handling because you can still crash your app. Sure, if you haven't handled exceptions, it'll crash your app really fast. But yeah, so the reason that you would use this as opposed to Objective-C is because Objective-C targets iOS only. And so you want to do this because you want to target iOS and Android and maybe Windows Phone.
Again, this is long time ago I did it, and they said to me the new version, I actually not new version Object-C, take care of them. Actually, iPhone 5 at that time they said to take care of that because you don't know what's going on. Suddenly, application is killed.
Yeah. See, and I'll be honest with you, I know that much about Objective-C, and that's by design. That's a decision that I made, and I'm happy with that. But I don't know anything at all about Objective-C. So, but this works really well. Now, one other thing that you're going to want to do, Visual Studio comes with its own set of Android emulators. I always install the Visual Studio emulator for Android. That's a better set of emulators than the ones that come by default. Now, the only caveat with this is that it requires that you have Hyper-V running on your machine. That could cause some problems. So let's say you have, for instance, VirtualBox, and you run virtual machines inside VirtualBox. It will not run with Hyper-V running on the same machine. You can only have one virtual machine manager at a time on your machine. So that's something to be concerned of. If you're going to use the one that comes in Visual Studio, then you need to make sure that you have Intel's Haxum. I don't even know what that stands for. But so there's some things that you need to be aware of for running these emulators. I prefer the Visual Studio emulator for Android. It gives you a lot of really good functionality.
You don't have those environment. Xamarin also has an emulator. That's what I use. I don't have those.
Now, what does it tell you when you first run it? Has it ever given you a message? It says it would be better to install an x86 accelerated Android emulator because they're 10 times faster. So the one that you're running, probably really slow.
It's not fast.
So these ones are more native type performance. You'll get better performance. But you're right, you could do that. You could do that without any hardware acceleration at all. That's absolutely right. Thank you. Okay, any questions so far?
You mentioned that you need the Mac. Is that still the case if you're using the Hyper-V emulation as well? Or
If you want to target iOS, you have to have a Mac. Yep. Yeah, because Mac doesn't run in a virtual machine, right? I mean, maybe somebody's got it for you, but yeah.
Yeah, I have no idea.
Yeah.
I also know nothing about Macs.
Yeah. So if you want to target iOS, and so my Mac sits on my network, I never even log into it. All it needs to be here for is to compile the app. I don't log into it. I don't do anything with it. It just sits there. It's a paperweight. Just that's what I did. I bought this one for 150 bucks off KSL. All right. Okay, so we're going to create a project. Now, there's two types of projects that you can create with Xamarin. There's the shared project, and there's the pickle. Okay. With the shared project, it does a little bit better for if you have specific functionality for each different platform. What you do is you use compiler directives, you know, the pound if, and you put that in your code, and you pound if iOS this, pound if Android this, pound else, whatever. I think it makes your code look really dirty, and I don't like using compiler directives unless I absolutely have to. So I don't use shared projects. Every project I've done, I've used a portable class library type project. And what that does is you put all of your common code into this portable class library, and then if you have custom functionality, you're going to reach out to the individual projects using dependency injection to get that platform-specific functionality. And we'll look at that and see how that works here in a minute, if I'm not too verbose. So my preference so far has been to use PCL. Okay. So let's go ahead and create a project. That sounds like a fun thing to do. So I'm going to drag this up here. So that, oh wait, no. Is that? No, that's my, that's the one that works. So this is my empty project. Oh, there it is right there. Look at that. Okay, so you can see here, I already have the Xamarin, or the Android emulator running right here, and I have the iPhone simulator running over here. Now you notice one's an emulator, one's a simulator. The emulator more closely, should I say, emulates the actual hardware that it's running on. So this is like a Galaxy S something or other, I can't remember. And it's pretty dang close to exactly what that hardware is. The iPhone one is a simulator. It does the best job that it can, but it's a simulator. I mean, it's running on, well, it's running on Mac, but, and so the simulator isn't quite as accurate. Obviously, when you're building an app, you're going to want to test it on a real device eventually, but these emulators / simulators give you a really good idea of what it's going to do. Okay. So here's our Visual Studio, and let's see if we can, yeah, this is 2017. I've been using that for a while. I like it, but all of this stuff that I'm doing today will work in 2015 also, so don't feel like you have to run out and install a free version of Community Edition 2017, although that would not be a bad idea, right? So we're going to create a new project. So we're going to say new project. Everybody's done this more than once, I'm sure. So there's all these options under here. One of them is cross-platform. So we're going to pick the cross-platform option, and we want to do a cross-platform app. There's these other options here. I don't care about those right now. We're going to do a cross-platform app. And then, so after this, so we're going to give it a name. Let's say, oh, I don't know, FTG demo, okay? And we'll put it in there, I don't really care. I'm not going to have it source control, so we hit OK. So what it'll do now is come up with another screen. You have to kind of pick your Xamarin options, what you want to do. So we're going to do Xamarin Forms. We could do Xamarin Forms or Xamarin Native. We're going to do Xamarin Forms, and I'm going to do a portable class library. Okay. We're not going to do about hosting in the cloud. So we're just going to do a blank app. We're going to hit OK. And then we're going to sit here and chat about the weather for a minute while this gets going.
You can tell us about the
2017 is 2 years newer than 2015. So, you know, essentially it includes C#7, right, which has some more support for tuples, and
as I say, my first time installing it, I didn't pick any options. I just installed it, like, oh, it's done in 3 minutes. What's going on?
yeah.
File name project. Where is everything?
Yeah, so when you go to install 2017, it's a completely different install process. You pick what kind of development you're going to do. So you say, I'm going to do web development. I'm going to do desktop development. And you pick the different types of development. Rather than picking all the individual features like you used to, you pick the types of development that you're going to do, and then it installs all the features for you. Now, if you don't pick any of them, it installs real quick. But, and it's supposed to be faster, it's supposed to take up less memory, it's supposed to just be like the new hotness. So,
It's still just as slow.
yeah, I mean, the install, you mean? Yeah, sure. And Visual Studio takes forever to install. So,
Updated like.
well, I actually, Okay, now this is for the Universal Windows project. I don't care about that. But I did want to mention one thing. Today, they announced the release of .NET Framework 4.7. So if anybody cares about that, that has been officially released today. It's going to be part of the Creators Update in Windows 10. So, and the Creators Update to Windows 10 was, oddly enough, released today. So your Windows machine should start downloading tons of crap to update to Creators Update. Oh, okay, there we go. So here's our solution. So let's go take a look at, as soon as, okay, let's go take a look at this. So you'll see we've got a bunch of different projects here in our solution. Well, this is the part I'm showing right here, right now. So that's all I care about right now. We can actually.
Yeah, that's all.
All right, so we get, by default, we get these 4 projects, okay? So we have our portable project. This is our portable class library. This is where almost all of your code is actually going to go, is in that portable class library. Then we have our Android project, we have our iOS project, and then I usually end up deleting this one. Unless you want to target Universal Windows Platform, which, you know, it's great because it'll be a Windows Store app. It'll run on Windows 10. It's a great app, but I just haven't gotten into that yet. So these are the 2 individual projects for the 2 individual platforms, and this is where you're going to put your platform-specific code. And so let's go look at, so now that we've installed that, let's go look at this. So, all right, so let's just go ahead and start building our application. So we're going to do data binding. So same as in WPF, the model of development that we use in XAML is MVVM, which stands for Model View ViewModel, right? So that's what we're going to do since we're using XAML, and we do a lot of data binding in Xamarin. And so there's 2 ways that you can specify a data. Well, all right, let's just go ahead and start building a project. So here's our application. Well, let's go ahead and run it. So I'm going to run this against. Okay, this is a problem. My emulator is not showing up for some reason.
For iPhone emulator.
No, my Android emulator. iPhone's a simulator, remember.
Oh, that's all right.
This is my Android emulator. It should show up as an option here. I have never had it not do that. Let's shut this down really quick, and we'll fire it back up again. I wonder. Okay, so I prepared this days ago, and everything worked. So everybody knows this worked every single time I've ever done this before. So this is somewhat embarrassing. Let's see.
iPhone one is there? Yeah.
This is the iPhone. Now, okay, so iPhone won't be there until you make the iOS one the default project. So let's do that while we're waiting for this thing to fire up. So right now you can see that the Android project is our default project. And you have all of the Android stuff up here. You have your Android emulators. You've got all of this stuff. This is your SDK installer and your Android SDK manager, all kinds of stuff up there. If we set this to iOS and make this our startup project, then you'll notice that things change up on that toolbar. So now we have our iOS stuff here. We can pick iPhone 7 Plus, iOS, whatever. And then if we hit run on this, it's going to compile, and theoretically, it should come up here in our iPhone simulator. Now, if you don't have Visual Studio Enterprise Edition, then this simulator is going to run on the Mac, and it'll pop up on the Mac. The Enterprise Edition of Visual Studio is what allows you to run it on Windows and let your Mac be a doorstop. Okay. And I must have the slowest Mac in the world because it takes forever to compile and build and run on the Mac. But we'll see if we can get that going. Yeah, right. Get what you pay for, right? Yeah, well, I've been known to be cheap. Yeah, in the Mac world.
It's $150. Sure.
Yeah, that's right.
From the 80s.
Exactly. Well, it's slick looking though, right? I mean, that's a nice looking piece of something.
Is that it?
This is the Mac right here. No, it's all in one thing.
It's the whole.
Yeah. Now you want to go buy a Mac, don't you?
Only for this.
Oh, exactly.
Yeah.
Oh, see, there's build errors.
Wow. New? Come on.
Yeah, so I ran into this. So we go look in here. Oh yeah, so I need to go into the properties here, and I need to uncheck the linker, but I need to say link SDK. Okay, so you might run into that. Let's try that again. A ton. Yeah. Man, I wish I still had my VIC 20. I bet I could sell that for like $10. That'd be awesome. Okay, so like I said, I mean, I think if you had a faster Mac, this would be much better. But I got to tell you, so I came in early to get the simulator up, because getting the simulator up initially takes like 5 minutes. Once it's up, it's much faster. As you can see, it's just smoking along right now. But to get the simulator up initially is really, really horrible. So anyway,
I don't get to see it.
yeah, you got this little guy right here. If that doesn't come up in just a second, we'll bag the whole idea and start over.
Curious.
What's that? Yeah.
Oh,
Exactly. Well, the nice thing about this is it gives you plenty of nap time opportunities. You know, run into the fridge to get a soda. So, you know, it's kind of built in to help you be more refreshed. I don't know. Well, let's move forward. It does work, I promise, but I don't want to waste everybody's time. We're running short on time as it is. Okay, I'm going to give it one more minute. Now, one beautiful thing about Android, again, way better than iPhone, is that if you plug this into your laptop, you can run it directly on the phone with nothing else. So it'll just show up in your on your drop down as device, or Samsung SM blah 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 blah. You can do it through Wi-Fi now. Very cool. So Android, if you want to run it on iOS, there's a whole thing you got to do with a developer account and setting up Xcode with the right this and setting up. It's a nightmare, and that's not Xamarin's fault. That's somebody else's fault.
It's Apple's gate.
It's Apple's walled garden.
Yeah.
All right, let's go ahead and bag this. Yeah, let's. Okay, but trust me that it does actually work. And if you want to see it after, we can try to get it running afterward. So we're going to set our Android app back up as the default, as the startup project. And okay, now it shows my emulator up there. So that's the emulator that I want. So let's go ahead and run that really quick. We run that and we bring up this emulator. And this works just like an Android phone. I had to swipe up to get into it, or mouse, hold, click, whatever. The nice thing about this emulator that I really like, because the app I'm working with has a lot of GPS stuff, you can come into here, into your location, and you can actually set up a series of points, and it'll track the roads, and then you can say go, and it will follow that either at the speed limit, at walking distance, or a certain whatever, and you can have it send that GPS to the emulator to look like you're driving down I-15 or hiking a trail in the middle of the Uintas or whatever. It's really, really slick. And you can also, you know, change the battery percentage. So if you look at the little battery icon there, wait, no, I'm not. See? Yeah, wouldn't that be awesome? I would love that. And you can emulate a camera. So obviously this doesn't have a camera on it. So you can have your laptop camera emulate either the front camera or the back camera, or you can have it pick an image. Say, I want this image. Every time I take a picture, it'll show this image. So you can test all that stuff. So the emulator here is really robust and gives you a lot of functionality in there. Close. And this one's taken a while as well, but
First time.
just the first time, yeah. Okay, now it says start debugging Android application. See what happens here. And there it is. Look at that, a white screen. Wait.
Oh, there you
Look at
go.
that. Welcome to Xamarin Forms. Isn't that cool? Okay. Yeah, so there's a ton of stuff. There's a ton of stuff going on in the background, but that's our Android app. So let's go make it something a little bit less boring. I mean, welcome to Xamarin Forms is pretty sweet, but we're going to do a little bit better than that. So what I want to do is I'm going to build a simple little to-do application. So we're going to come into here. So you'll see here we have our main page.xaml. So that's that page that had the welcome to Xamarin Forms. That's our main page that gets displayed when the app is run. Okay. And here's our Xamarin for that, label text equals blah, blah, blah. Okay. So we're going to come in here and we're going to wipe this out. And I'm going to type really, really fast so you guys are on board. Okay. That's just how good I am. So we created a new page. What this is going to do is this is just like a quick to-do app. Now, let me actually take this out for a minute. All my toolbars are gone. I'll just take that out. What is it? I can never remember that one. Control-CK, yeah. Dang it, Scott.
I just like to list X.
That didn't work either. There we go. Okay, so we'll take that out for a moment. Now let's go look at our code. So you'll see here I'm doing some bindings. Well, what the heck am I binding to? Right now I'm not binding to anything because I don't have a data context, right? So these are giving me errors because it doesn't know what the heck I'm talking about. So what we're going to do, I'm actually going to comment this thing out here. Whoops. Yeah, I hit Control-J. That doesn't seem to do the same thing.
Control-Z now.
All right, what am I doing? You know how hard it is to look this way while you're typing? Give me a break. All right. Okay, so now there's a XAML previewer that you can use in here so you can see what your XAML looks like without running it in the emulator. I have yet to get that to work. I don't know what I'm doing wrong, but it just didn't work.
Yeah.
So
We're used to it now.
yeah, so good luck with that. So first of all, what we're going to do is we're going to create a view model for our to put our code into. So we're just going to create a regular class. We're going to call it main page view model. Okay. Now there's two ways that we can bind to this view model from our XAML. We can either bind it inside of the XAML itself, or we can bind it in code. So if we want to bind it inside the XAML itself, what we can do is, I'm going to type really fast again. We're going to come up here inside the content page, and we're going to do that. So that will bind to our main page view model. So we'll create a new instance of it and allow us to bind to that. Okay, so this is, if you want to do pure, unadulterated, you know, separate the presentation from the, that's how you would do it. Okay, everything's in the XAML. You don't do anything in the main page.cs. The other way that you could do it, and we're going to keep it like this, but I'll show you. The other way that you could do it would be to go into your, oh, sorry. Yeah, you need to go into the CS file. And so here's the CS file for our main page. And you would just do that. Binding context equals new main page view model. Now, there may be reasons that you want to do this. Let's say that you want to subscribe to some events from the view model, or you want to do some navigation that you need access to the view model in your page. Now I know you're going to say that's not pure MVVM. Sometimes I don't care, to be honest with you. I want to get the job done. Sometimes you need to do things like this. You can do that, or you can do it the other way, and we'll do that. If you use an inject, yeah, sure. And there's another one that I'm actually looking into now. It's called Prism MVVM, and it's an MVVM framework to be used with Xamarin, and it has a lot of really cool functionality. You can do all the navigation inside the view model and don't have to. And there's a lot of really neat things that you can do with Prism. We're not going to look at that today. Okay, so we have now our new page, and we have our view model, but we don't have any code in our view model. So let's get some code into our view model really quick. So the first thing that we want is we want to have a list. Well, we want to have an item that we can add, right? So we're going to come up here. Actually, the first thing that we need to do okay, now, if we want to do a data binding to this view model, there's a specific interface that we need to implement. Does anybody know what that is? Am I typing it right? There we go. I notify property change. So that will allow us to, when we change something, it notifies the view and everything can be done. So we're going to implement that interface really quick. Okay. So now we've got the on property change. Now, so we're going to create a new to-do item. So we need a class called to-do item. So I'm going to grab that. Come back over here. Yeah, I've already got code in it to do stuff, so I'm just lazy. I really don't want to type stuff if I can help it. I gotta keep T's. Yeah, looks right. Good enough for government work anyway. Okay. Okay, so there is our, okay, I'm going to have to take this out for just a moment. Man, I hope I control KC, right? Okay, I hope I have time. Oh man, we're running short on time. I apologize. That stuff is for the SQLite, and if we have time, we'll get to it. If not, it'll be in my project that I'm going to post up on the side. So, okay, so what we have here is just a really simple little object that's going to hold some information for us. So now if we go back to our main page, we can see that, oh, we need to get a new item. So okay, so we're going to do this. So we've got our new item here. Oh yeah, I need to do that. I love ReSharper, isn't that awesome? And then we're just going to put in that property there. What did I do wrong here? I think I put it in the wrong place. Put it in the middle of other code. You shouldn't do that, just so you know. Paste in the middle of another keyword, it usually doesn't work. Yeah, I didn't make the rules, I just try to follow them.
Use the parser something now.
Yeah, right. Okay, so now you can see that we're now able to bind to new item.description and everything is looking rosy. So let's come over to here and we'll come into our constructor here. Man, I hate typing like this. Oh yeah, you're right. See, I've got all this stuff in the way. So now we're going to say, is it working?
No.
Man, I can type blind. That's freaking awesome.
You got an Emulator.
Okay, never mind. I take that back. All right. So So now, when I come up to here, actually, let's do this too, so that you can see that that does actually work. We're going to say new item dot description equals. Now, if we run this in our Android emulator, do I still have SQLite stuff in there? Oh, yeah. Yeah. Oh, I don't want that either. Just take that out. Try that. Isn't dead air like the worst thing you can do on a radio show? Man, I feel horrible. Oh, look at that. It's coming up already. Okay, and there you can see it works. So we have our data binding to our view. Isn't that cool? All right, okay. All right, so we don't want to do this because that'll close the emulator. And that was actually pretty quick, if you think about it. So now we've got that. So what we want to do, though, is we want the ability to add more items to a list, right? That's what a to-do list is for. So you can see here in our main page, the way that we bind data is we do this binding and then just bind directly to the property. So we're binding to that text property. If we want to bind to a button and have it do something, we bind to the command. Okay, so we're going to uncheck our button here, or uncomment our button here. And I know control something, something, but I can't remember it. So we're going to do this. See, that worked too. Okay, so we're going to bind to the command, and we're going to create a command called add item command. Okay, so let's go get that from my magic thing over here. Okay, so what I like to do is here in the view model, I'll instantiate something like, or declare something like that. Oh, I brought up my camera over here. That's weird. Okay, so we're going to create an iCommand object called addItemCommand, and then in our constructor, I'm just going to use a little inline function to set that up. So we'll come down here. I'm going to get rid of this. We don't want it to have anything like that. We'll do something like that. So what we're going to do is we're going to bind to this command, and it's going to, do what it needs to do. We also need an observable collection. So we want to bind a list to a collection, right? So we need to make sure that it's an observable collection, because just making it a list, it's never going to notify the UI that anything's happened. So we'll do that. We'll come here, and we'll do that. Okay. Oh, except in the wrong place. Okay, I'm telling you, it's not easy. Right next starting to. Okay, so now we also need a property with the iNotify changed, and so we'll pop that in here as well. Okay, that should be everything we need for that, right? We'll figure that out. So now, oh, because I'm not doing an await. Let's actually go ahead and take that async out for now. All right. Okay, so now when we run this, it should add, so if we go look at our main page.xaml, I'd also need to get this list view out of here. Uncomment that.
See that you did it.
Yeah, otherwise it's not going to show us anything. All right. So you can see now that these aren't underlined anymore because now it knows what those things are. So if I run this in my Android emulator,
Every time you hit
hold music.
there you go.
That's what it should be, it's hold music.
The girl from Ecuador.
Okay, so now let's see if this works. Okay, everybody cross your fingers or else it might not. So we're going to say do a brown bag is one of my to-do list items. We're going to hit add. Look at that. Okay, so what I did here is I made a stack panel and I have a label and a switch. So now if we look at this on the iPhone, this switch would look like an iPhone switch, right? So as I toggle this back and forth, you can't see it, but trust me, it's changing the class behind the scenes. So, and unfortunately, I think we're almost out of time. So we'll push off the SQLite stuff. Like I said, I'll include it in my thing. I don't think we have time because I'll show you what you need to do to get it working at least. So let me see what we've got over here really quick. Make sure to when I notify change. Okay, so we got all that. We're good on that. Oh, really quickly, one thing, if you want to do some platform-specific UI, so what you're going to notice is that in this app, or in most apps, on the Android screen, it looks fine, right? The enter your item text is right at the top of the screen, it looks fine. For some reason, Apple does it a little bit differently, and their 00 is the very, very top of the screen, at the top of the toolbar, or the status bar on top. Android, the 00 is under the status bar. So if we ran this on the iPhone simulator, and we'll try that after if you want, then the enter your item below is going to be covered up by the taskbar. So what I had to do here is right underneath your content page, you put in this extra thing. So content page.padding on platform, we're going to set the type of the argument is going to be thickness. Now, depending on what you're setting, you may be setting a font size, or you may be setting something. Whatever you're setting, that's going to be the type of the property that you're setting. So in this case, it's a thickness, which is a left, top, right, and bottom string.
So in workflow, it's fairly easy. How are you doing?
Run it in the simulator to see what it does.
Then you're guessing to figure out what it is, but make the adjustments accordingly.
Yeah. So if you bring it up and it's still not quite right, you close it, change it, bring it up again. That's just the property of the padding. So the property is padding, and the padding takes a thickness data type. Okay. So
That's got code completion.
yes, it does. It does. So when you do that, so you're going to say on platform argument equals thickness, and then you specify the platform. So if we wanted a different one for Android, we'd say on platform.android 0.93.8.6 or whatever. And so you can set that up for each platform. And you can do this for pretty much any control. You can just put this inside of the XAML for the control and do the on platform. And there's a couple of different ways to do platform specific. In fact, the interesting thing is that this is underlined here because it says that this has been deprecated. And yet every bit of documentation I can find says this is the way to do it. So if they deprecated, they didn't tell anybody about it. The very newest one. But I can't find any documentation that says how to do it different. So anyway, yeah. So this is how I do it. Okay. Yeah, well, yeah, so everybody knows that Xamarin is owned by Microsoft now, right? I should have mentioned that up front. So using SQLite. So what I use is I use this NuGet package called SQLite-net-PCL. And so you'll install that from NuGet. And the important thing to do is to make sure that you add it to all the projects in the solution. It has to be in your Pickle, in your Android, in your Apple, and in your Windows. It has to be in every project. And that's really easy to do because you can manage NuGet packages for the entire solution. Just check them all and it'll install it. It takes a little while, which is kind of why I can't do it right now. It takes a little while to actually install all of that stuff. But that's how you do. Then you would use DI, and again, I apologize. We're going over time. Would 5 extra minutes be okay? Is there anybody that can't? Let's just go over DI really quick to show you how that works, because that is kind of important. If you want to do any kind of platform-specific stuff, and so I'm going to bring this over. This is the actual finished project. This is the one that I'm going to be making available to download. So we'll go look at how this works really quick. So the first thing that you need to do in your portable class library is to create an interface. And this interface is going to define what methods you want your specific functionality to do. So we're creating a file helper because we want to get a file path where we can put our database. Okay, so we're going to have a method called get local file path. Real easy, right? So then we go into each individual project, and I created a class here called file helper. Now this is in the Android project. This is not in the portable class library. So this is custom functionality for Android. And you can see here that I'm decorating it with this dependency attribute. And I'm implementing the iFile helper, and then that gives me the get local file path, and then I do the platform-specific functionality inside of this method. So the way that Android does it is environment.get folder path, environment.blah-blah-blah, such and such. Okay. So if we go look at the iOS, we can see that we also have a file helper class in here that's decorated the same way, but this functionality is a little bit different because iOS requires a little bit different way of doing it. You can do everything using C#. It's just that each platform does it a little bit differently, even using C#. Okay, so now we've got our interface, we've got our class. We want to get our database. So in our app, we've got this line of code right here. So I'm instantiating a copy of my local database class, okay? And then to do that, I have to pass in the name of the file, or the path to the file that I want that database to be. So I do a dependency service.get, then I pass in the interface that defines what that is going to be, and then I can do the get local file path. So when you run this on each platform, Xamarin knows, okay, for Android, I need to go find a class in the Android project that implements iFile helper, and then I can call that. In iOS, same thing. And so it'll call the iOS one. So that's how you do platform-specific functionality. You're using interfaces, and you're using that dependency service to do that. Okay? All right. Let's see what else. Oh, and using SQLite, it's essentially code-first development. You build your classes, you decorate them with the properties or with the attributes, primary key, table, blah, blah. And then when you go in your code, you say create table, create table, create table, and it'll create the tables if it needs to, or just leave them. And so it kind of does all the whole code first on that. Okay, so no, we're actually not too bad. So in conclusion, I think that Xamarin can be used in almost all of our line of business applications. It really fits well for the stuff that we do. And there are actually games written in Xamarin. I mean, if you go to that page that shows all the customers of Xamarin, there's actually quite a few games written in Xamarin that take advantage of it. Xamarin can use all the native functionality, so there's nothing that you can't do with Xamarin yet. Who knows someday. But Xamarin's constantly updating. I mean, I'm always getting updates to Xamarin. They're adding new functionality all the time. You can leverage your current C# skills. You install it from there. And remember, if you want to target iOS, you've got to have a Mac, because that's just how Apple is. Okay. And then that's the answer to life, universe, and everything. You got that. All right. It's funny. Quick little side story. On October 10th, 2010. I thought that was going to be the end of the world. I thought, it's perfect. It's 42. It's the life. It didn't happen, as you can obviously see. So anyway, thank you for coming to the presentation. I think we're out right on time again. I'll make this recording available, and I'm going to make my project available that shows you how to do the SQLite stuff. I apologize I didn't get to that. I tend to ramble, and that's my fault. But thank you for coming.